Welcome to the Heritage Show. Today's episode features Yola Jean Lu, a comedian, filmmaker, and creator of the heartfelt film Patsy. Yola opens up about her journey from working in tech to pursuing comedy and improv, the personal challenges that shaped her art, and her passion for building community and representation in the Asian American comedy scene. This conversation is all about vulnerability, creativity, and breaking new ground. Let's dive in. Hello, Yola. Welcome to the Heritage Show. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, Ling, thank you so much for asking me. I'm super excited to do this.
I'm so excited to have this conversation because I've been following for a while and I really like your comedy, your style, and your movie. We're going to talk more about that later, but just want to say I'm a big fan of you and your sense of humor is really relatable. Also because you are Asian American, we share some similar cultures. Really would like to explore on that end as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Most people know you from your comedy. The first question is, what's your mission and what is the impact you want to leave in this world through the work you do?
Yeah, so it's so funny that you asked that because I've been actually trying to re-figure that out for myself. I feel like I'm in a weird space of being completely burnt out. And I
Oh,
think it's because I'm not necessarily aligning myself with fully the things that I might be wanting to do. So I think it goes back to my whole process of one, I didn't always know this, but I've always wanted to create some sort of community with either my comedy or things that I am making because ultimately at the end of the day I want people to feel seen and I want people to feel less alone in some aspect. And I remember when I created my show last year called Help My Vagina's Trying to Kill Me. It
yes.
was really a show that I made because there were so many things that I was going through at the time and I kept thinking even as I was going through some of these things that were so incredibly hard, I never thought like, man, I wish there was a show like this, but I wish I saw maybe even something or someone talking more openly about some of these issues where I would feel less alone and I wouldn't feel like there was nobody I could talk to. People didn't feel comfortable bringing up certain things. For example, like my miscarriage at the time,
Mm,
I was like first person in my group of friends to get pregnant. And usually when people have miscarriages, like it happens before they ever announce like their pregnancy, you know? And
yeah.
so if it happens, before then, nobody ever brings it up or anything like that. Because I was in a weird spot where I was to the point of announcing it. It was actually the day we were going to publicly announce because we just got into the second trimester.
No.
And then that morning, I had the miscarriage, and it was like, what? And then it was like also one of the most painful things I've been through, and I just felt like none of my friends knew what I was going through. I didn't know who to talk to, and I didn't want to just be like posting this on the internet at the time, especially
Mm,
when it was still so raw, and be like, this is what happened. Who can relate? Someone talk to me because I'm going crazy.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I have always just wanted to create some sort of work that people could feel less alone seeing, but I also wanted the stuff to be me, where I felt like I could be as weird as I wanted to be. I could use like my sense of humor. And even if people don't totally relate to that, it's like my way of expressing myself and also my way of like really enjoying what I'm doing. So I'm sorry, that was like such a long answer to like go to like what are your values? But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Yola. I hear so many interesting words you highlighted. But first of all, I want to say I'm so sorry for the miscarriage that
Oh, thank you.
you had gone through. And actually, two good friends of me recently also went through the similar experience, so I can definitely relate to the pain that you're going through. They also share with me the sense of feeling alone in this, because not only this is a very sensitive topic to share, to talk about, but also there might be a lot of misconception about this experience. Maybe some of the partner even, or maybe friends would think it's not even alive yet, or maybe it's not even a baby yet. What's
Right.
such a big deal? But actually, I think when the moment you conceive, you have a, how to say, fertilized egg, it's alive. It doesn't matter how many weeks into the pregnancy. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And thank you for sharing this experience for more women to feel relatable and can feel they're not alone. When you talk about burnout, it's also touched me because I'm a burnout and resilience coach. And I had burnout myself twice because I was not on the right path of my life. That's why I quitted my corporate job. Now I become a full-time coach and doing the things I love. So yeah, we can definitely touch upon
That's
on
awesome.
that.
Congratulations on that, by the way, for
Thank
like
you.
recognizing that about yourself and then being like, this isn't right for me. This isn't sustainable. I need something that will make me happier. And I don't think people understand how much courage it takes to to leave a comfortable corporate job that you know, here's my paycheck that I get each time, and then going into something so unknown is so scary. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
so big kudos to you for doing that.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And I couldn't help notice that you were also, or maybe still somewhat in tech, because I heard that you actually signed up a boot camp for coding. That's how you moved
Mhm.
to Austin. While doing comedy and improv, perhaps was originally a side project. Would
Yeah.
you like to share more? How did you get into this?
Yes. So a little bit of background for all of this, actually. I decided to get into stand up. It was almost a complete whim. Growing up in my family, we always kind of struggled with money. And so I remember when I went into college, I was like, I need to have a good, I want to be employed. That was a whole thing that I want to
Mm.
have a job. And then so my whole time in college, it was like constantly doing internships, and then so many of these internships were unpaid because I wasn't going into some of these big business like corporate sort of things. In my head I was like, oh, I think I want to do tech PR at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Was such a niche sort of thing, so I would like go into these small PR companies, didn't pay any sort of money. So because of that, I was also working like these other part-time jobs. I took credits a quarter, which was like the max you could do for your class. Most people took the 15. And then I even took summer classes. Even when I was like in a sorority, I took all the leadership roles. I was like president, like did all these things that was like, how can I get my resume to look good so people would be interested in hiring me? And then I actually ended up graduating like I think a quarter early or something. And I just had this moment where I was like, man, I didn't do anything that I even really wanted to totally do while I was in college, because I had this idea in my head that once you started working in the real world, you would have no time to pursue things that you loved and stuff. I don't
Yeah,
know why I thought that, but
it can be true actually. If
yeah, that actually that is, yes. Now knowing other people's lives, I'm like, oh yeah, it is a little true in a way. And then so I made a bucket list of what I wanted to do before I started a new job. And one of the things on there was stand-up comedy. And then I took a class, did my showcase, and it ended up being just probably the most alive I had ever felt
Mm.
at that moment. Kind of like that there was something that was unleashed inside of me, because I always actually thought I was funny, and I was always like the funniest of all of my friends. And I also liked performing a ton when I was younger. And then
Mm.
I kind of lost that in a way. And so doing like stand up, which was something that I had never really known about, I actually watched stand up for the first time, I think in 2011, and I started doing stand up in 2012. It's kind of
Wow,
crazy of how this all ended up
fast.
happening. Yeah, yeah. And then once I got bit by that bug, I was like, this is what I want to do. And then so I kind of changed directions very quickly. I thought I could do a little bit of the best of both worlds where I became an operations clerk, which was basically a receptionist slash admin at this very high up there, well respected PR company. Because I figured, well, if it doesn't work out, I could always go into the PR route because I do have all this experience and whatnot. And then it just ended up being that the job, I think, was like, what, maybe like $18 an hour, maybe a little less or something. Making that money while living in Washington, in the Seattle metro area at the time, just wasn't cutting it, even though I was like still living with my parents. And that was how like I knew like what this isn't, I need more money. And then I got into tech consulting through like a sorority sister of mine, and then also like realized that that also wasn't enough money. And then I was like, that's how I got into the boot camp, because I heard software engineers make good money or whatever.
Yeah.
And then ended up finding this boot camp in like Houston, some the outskirts of Houston, that was starting for their first year, their first cohort. And they were basically offering like, hey, if you want to kind of be our guinea pigs in a way, let us try this. And then in return, you write a review for us. It's only $1,000 for the entire boot camp. You just
Wow.
have to get your own housing and everything. And then once I got there, something about the weather, even though it was so humid and so
Mm,
hot, just made me feel better. And I think it was the first time I realized that I had really bad seasonal depression in
ah,
Seattle.
in the winter.
And right, because you always know that that's like a thing, but you don't ever really realize like how much that affects you until you go somewhere else,
To a
and you're
sunnier
like,
place.
wow, that
Yeah.
was really hard. Like, yeah, yeah. And then, but at the time in Houston, there was like not really a comedy scene there. There was like one improv. And I don't know anything about Austin. This was before Austin blew up on the map of for everything. And then
Mm,
so I just on a whim was like, I feel like Austin is probably more of a creative city for things like this. And then I just on a whim went, took a Greyhound, didn't know a single person there. Luckily, my office in Seattle, the company I was working for, I took an extended leave. They let me transfer to the Austin office and then got my car shipped down, and that was kind of it. And definitely going to Austin was so life-changing because it was the reason I have the tech career I have now. And then also it helps me find other avenues of comedy that wasn't just stand up. I like really got into sketch comedy, which was something I really loved before also, but didn't have a ton of opportunities to do it even in Seattle. And then I got really into long form improv, which in Seattle at the time we only had short form improv and narrative improv. And then I eventually found acting, got an agent, started making my own stuff. Yeah, Austin really changed my life, honestly. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. That's interesting because I recently hear something from one podcast. I forgot from whom, but basically, the morale is three most important thing in your life is where do you live, what do you do, and to whom you spend your time with. That really
Mm.
resonates with your story of how a place or moving to a new place could change your life. And I hear so many similar experience that you had growing up in an Asian family and having that pressure to perform or having a good job, and then kind of still have that creative side that you want to express. Because I also was a performer when I was younger. I stopped singing and dancing for many years. I only pick up recently. I see a lot of similarity in our stories. And I love
Yeah.
that you mentioned about your experience doing the stand-up and this curiosity, or perhaps this feeling of alive on the stage, just open a completely new avenue for you. Yeah, that's amazing. Beautiful story. And you mentioned about the acting and improv.
Mhm.
I see you've been really working amazingly on this movie called Patsy, which is based on
Yeah.
your personal stories. I only see the teaser, but I really love it. I see how
Oh.
the story is really relatable. I love the sense of humor, especially about the vision board one. I
Yeah,
also
yeah,
watched your short series called Uncomfortable. Perhaps
yeah.
that's from earlier
Mhm.
years. Yeah, it was really
Yes,
funny.
yes,
So would you
yes.
like to share more?
Thank you.
How did you get into acting, and how is your filmmaking career going?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because in my head or in my soul, I've always wanted to act or like be in front of the camera, but I don't know what it is. If it's just like sometimes like growing up as an Asian in America or an Asian woman in a way, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. When somebody compliments you or whatever, it's the natural inclination that we've always been taught is to be like, no, no, no. Oh, you think my
No,
hair
no,
looks
yeah.
nice?
Be modest.
Well, it's
Yeah.
only because I showered this morning. Yeah, it feels like it's so ingrained in the culture. You have to be so modest about everything, and you don't in some ways even want the attention, or the fact that you want attention is bad. Even I think that's in some ways so much of our culture in general outside of Asian
Mm.
culture, but I feel like in Asian culture specifically, it is that. And then so it was really hard for me to admit that I wanted to like be the star of something or act in front of a camera or be in front of the camera, like the cast, the talent. And then so for the longest time, I kept telling myself, oh, I just want to be the writer on this show or like
Behind the
whatever.
scene.
And yeah, and then there was a part of me that was always like, but I don't. I know that I keep saying that, but I definitely don't feel like I could do that. And then even with like acting, for example, I it took me so long to like finally pursue acting like seriously in a way because I I dealt with like a lot of like body image issues like my entire life. Like I've dealt with like always feeling like, oh, I'm too fat to like be in front of the camera. I have to like lose a bunch of weight first before I could even pursue like being an actress and stuff. And then I think it wasn't until, you started seeing that I started like meeting other actors, and I like noticed that like, so many of these actors weren't like the perfect like Hollywood looking
Mm.
like blonde, blue-eyed, like even like the Asian actors we see on screen are the most beautiful that you would see, like Gemma
Mm.
Chan is an example of that, where it's just like,
Yeah.
you're gorgeous. What? Of course you would be this, and
Yeah.
it just felt like in some ways you were comparing yourself to that level, and you're just like, no, there's no way I could ever
Mm.
do that. So uncomfortable actually happened before I started taking acting classes professionally.
Ah.
And that was because
Wow.
I think my real dream is actually my biggest goal, biggest dream, even to this day, is that I want to write and star in my own TV series that I created that like
Mm.
tells like a story of mine somehow. And when I created that web series Uncomfortable, it was like at this like height where so many people were creating web series at the time, because you started seeing the success of, I think it was like Broad City, that like got really, really popular at the time. And then now everybody was trying to like go that model of like making these small little web series in hopes that it would get picked up to be a TV show. And I think I remember like watching so many of these. Issa Rae also had Insecure. That was a really big one as well. And then so I was watching even their original stuff and I was like, wait, this is just such a small concept that they took. Some of these videos were less than like 2 minutes. Most of Broad
Yeah.
City videos were under 2 minutes. And then they didn't have a connective tissue necessarily throughout. And then so that really inspired me because that was kind of like what I had wanted to create in a way. And then so I didn't know anything about filmmaking. I didn't know anyone in the film scene in Austin. I didn't know any directors. And then so this was super scrappy. I just had a bunch of ideas that I knew would be presented better on film than it was on paper. And then so
Mm.
I found a bunch of comedians that I thought were like funny or good or whatever. And I was like, hey, even if you don't have experience directing, which was all of them, by the way, it's fine. I just need you to maybe help me with like acting or the delivery of the lines and stuff like that. And then we'll want to figure it out. And it was the smallest skeleton crew. It was like my cinematographer who mostly only taped people's stand-up sets and stuff like that, but just also happened to
Yeah.
have a nice camera. And he filmed somebody else's like web series at the time too. And then he also ended up doing the lighting and the sound. And one of my best comedy friends was my producer. She had gone to film school a decade ago, but she's never made anything since then. And then it was my boyfriend who then became my husband, now ex-husband at the time, who was kind of like the PA slash just an extra hand on there, and then we would have a different rotating
Mm.
director each episode. And we did 6 episodes in 3 days, which was
Wow.
actually insane now that now that I know how filmmaking should ideally work in a way. We
Yeah.
were pushing, 16, 18-hour days and stuff because I didn't have enough money to like pay anything like further than that. And I will say like after shooting the last episode, going home and like going to bed that night, it was like the first I was so exhausted, like so tired, but it was the
Yeah.
first time that I felt really satisfied with the
Mm.
work that I put in. Not not that I felt like I deserved the rest or something, but it was just like, wow, this was like a really long, hard days of work, and I feel really proud of what I accomplished. And this sense of tiredness coming from that just was the best feeling that I've ever had. I've never felt more fulfilled after
Wow.
doing that. And that has honestly been the high that I have been chasing this like entire time. And a whole point of me like even creating this series was like I I have never necessarily been the person to like wait for like the gatekeepers to like let me in. Like I haven't been
Mm.
somebody that was like, okay, we're gonna give you this opportunity or we're gonna let you do this and stuff. It's always been like, if you're not gonna invite me to your table, then I'm gonna build my own table, sort of thing.
Mm.
Like because I don't want to wait necessarily, and I want to still have my own creative vision and doing it in a way that I would like, because I have no idea when anybody would invite me to do this. So it's like, well, I guess do it now. And then
Yeah.
with acting, I got into it, I think maybe 2 years before COVID lockdowns. And it was just to, I think at the time it was like, I'll do this beginning acting class because in hopes that it would make me a better stand up or something. I don't know why I thought that, but I was like, sure, maybe it would. And then I went to my first acting class, and for people who have never taken acting classes, so many of them are so, so, so weird. And
I
a
can
lot of
imagine.
the teachers, yeah, a lot of the teachers are very unhinged. you'll see them on TV as like portrayed of these really crazy ladies or people that will like, make you do some like weird stuff. And it's absolutely true, by the way. And I remember the first class we were in, like she had us like all crawl on our hands and knees, pretending like we were wolves or some sort of animal or something.
Wow.
And like I remember the second class, like half the people dropped out. Like,
Yeah,
and
I can
then
imagine.
right. And then because a weird thing for me is that I won't quit something that I committed to. It's like a
Mm,
toxic maybe trait of mine. Even though I didn't love it, I was like, well, I said I would do it, so let's keep doing it, I guess. And then even my best friend at the time, I dropped out of the classes and everything. And so it
oh
was
no.
just me and knowing nobody else in this class. And she was such a hard ass. But there was one day that I did something that she liked, and she just said, "Hey, that wasn't bad." That's it. Like, that
Mm,
wasn't bad. Not even like a true compliment, but because she's
yeah.
so hard to impress, I was like, oh, okay. And then it kind of, because you had to in some ways be so vulnerable in that
Mm,
class, and I wasn't used to doing that in like this public
public,
setting,
yeah.
yeah. And I didn't even go as like vulnerable or whatever that as I now know that I could go, but it was such a weird feeling at the time. And then after that, I think I want to try to take more classes and stuff.
Mm,
And then so yeah, so I did and just kind of got this like acting bug bit into me. And I remember when I finally, there was one talent agency very well known in Austin as being the most prestigious, being the best, the hardest to get into because they were the ones that were focused on film and television and they got the best auditions because people even in the industry thought of them as the best. And I just knew at the time that's who I want to go with. It's them or bust sort of thing. And then I like sent them my application, my headshot, like whatever. And like they actually got back to me within like 3 days and was like, "We're
okay.
interested in signing you." And I was like, "What?" Because I've known so many people that like got rejected, even like Asian women, because like in my head I was like, "Oh, it's only because I'm a diversity hire or whatever." And it's like I was like, "No, like my other Asian female friends, like who are way better than me, like didn't even necessarily get signed." And then so that was like this huge sense of approval. Yeah, this is what I think I should be doing in a way. And it just made me feel like I was going down the right path or that I was accepted, I was good enough and stuff. But yeah, again, another long answer to get to what you were asking, I think. Yeah.
I love that. I love that, Yola. Especially, I love that you have this actually quite of, I would say, attack spirit in terms of your iteration, and you do it in a scrappy way. In the first iteration, you can always improve on it. And then I loved your spirit of building your own thing and don't ask for permission and
Mhm.
don't wait for opportunity but grab it. And I think a lot of women um, really want such an inspiration and empowerment, because many of my friends, I hear from them lately, their struggle was about change career, perhaps find their passion. And I hear you mention about those time that when you fall in love with comedy, when you use curiosity and continue pursue and getting the classes and trying on your own to film the short series. I guess those
Yeah.
are the ways to somehow build confidence and really find your path.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So you've been released a very interesting movie called Patsy that is based on your personal experience, where the story was about the marriage, the divorce, the depression, which I think are really touching and also very funny. So I would like to know more about what was the creative process, how did you start the project, and how did it go after? Did you go to some film festivals, and how was the feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with Patsy, I I actually got inspired to write this because I was chatting with my friend Atsuko Okatsuka, who is another like very successful like a female Asian comic. We used to do like disoriented comedy together, and then and yeah, she's just like blowing up now. And she was in Austin for a comedy festival, and we got breakfast while she was here. And she mentioned something to me that really like perked my ears, which was kind of in her ways of how she does like the creative process, even just for her stand-up specials. She had a special called The Intruder, and it was about basically I can't remember if there actually was an intruder that like broke into her house or
No.
if like she maybe was just thinking it. I can't remember this exactly,
Mm,
but it like clicked to me that I was like, whoa, you made an entire hour-long special based on this one situation. And then obviously it wasn't just about the intruder. She's gonna
yeah.
go back to because of this thing that happened in my past, which like got me to like this thing. And then so I thought that was so interesting. And at this time, like I had gone through what felt like I had just gone through my divorce. Like I had the miscarriage, gone through my divorce, and then it was like a in some ways kind of not a messy divorce, but it was complicated for me like emotionally at the
Mm,
time because it wasn't ever a bad marriage, you know. And then after the separation of me and my and this was also COVID lockdown, um, I wasn't able to like do anything. I wasn't able to bury myself in the work that I normally would have wanted to do in terms of like running out and doing a bunch of shows or open mics or classes or whatever. I was living at my parents' place at the time during lockdown. I was working from home. I was eating in the room all the time. I couldn't really see my friends. And then so I felt super isolated. And because this was the first time that I had felt so alone
mm,
in almost like a decade, even, I like went on the dating apps pretty fast and,
mm,
somehow found somebody pretty quickly
mhm.
that I really liked. And I think it was just like, obviously now looking back at it, it was like this infatuation. It was putting them on this pedestal
That's
at the
so, mm,
time. Yeah, because he was just like so different than my ex-husband at the time and just was so successful in his thing, like his own place. And then it felt like we connected and conversed really well. And then it like didn't work out because ultimately I was not planning to stay in Seattle. And he refused to let me give up on my dreams to stay for him in a
mm,
way. And then I was pretty heartbroken at the time. I feel like I just remember crying so much. It felt like something was ripped out from me because I actually think sometimes things like this hurt so much more than even a full relationship that
yeah,
ends because at least in that full relationship, you got to play it fully out. And
right.
then when you're in this thing of like, in some ways, even never having gotten fully started, but you have all these thoughts and
Yeah,
ideas of like,
imagination.
yeah,
Yeah,
it would have been so nice to like go on vacation with you
yes.
here. You have all these things and you like keep thinking they could have been the one. And then so
Mm,
there's this sadness that goes when you don't get to fully experience that.
right.
And then it was like so weird because he actually he like didn't respond to any of my messages throughout, and that also in some ways felt kind of cruel, I guess.
Mm,
And then which I understand, why he did it, but like he like messages me almost like 6 months later, and I still actually happened to be, in Washington. I knew I was going to be here for a while. We just didn't want to like keep going down this path knowing I was gonna
yeah,
leave.
and
And then, yeah, and then so he like invites me over to his place. And this whole time, by the way, I've been taking things incredibly slow with him because I I have HSV2, which is genital herpes.
Mm.
And I like, oh, I wanted to make sure I disclosed to him before, especially if we were going to try to be in like a serious relationship sort of thing. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure there was like nothing of that level in, especially if you were planning to like be intimate together and stuff. So we had like never had sex even prior to that, like
Mm.
kissed maybe like twice, I think. And then so just taking it incredibly, incredibly slow. And then so when I came over, I actually always thought he was shy too because he never was pushy or whatever. And I was like, why did you invite me over? And I think he was like a little drunk and stuff. So he was like, because I wanted to hook up with you before you left to go back to go to LA or to Austin or
Awesome.
whatever.
Mm.
And I was so shocked like that he had asked that. And
Mm.
then, but I was like, but I have to tell him, I need to let him know. And at this time, also, I again had just gotten out of this 8-year relationship with my ex-husband, and I haven't had, even before like meeting him, I hadn't had to disclose that often because I wasn't dating a ton prior to that either. And so I just didn't have a ton of experience disclosing and found the best process that worked for me. So it's like I told him and he just was like absolutely not. This is why I didn't have a ton of hookups even in college because I was so afraid of getting like an STD and whatnot. And then it just was like that itself almost devastated me harder than what was like before because I think in my head, I had always thought he was so open-minded. He liked me so much that he would have hopefully accepted me for it regardless and stuff. And then so because I still was holding on, I think to this pain in a way, I that inspired me to make Patsy, which was basically just learning after my divorce, trying to find love again in
Mm.
my mid 30s. And it's interesting because the first iteration of the film that I wrote, I did actually have in him rejecting me because of the herpes. But
Mm.
my director was looking at it. I actually think, I know you want this to be true to life and to who you are and everything, but he was like, I think it might be a better ending for, the audience and your character if you were the one who said no to him when he asked you,
Mm.
because then it's showing growth throughout the movie. Because the whole theme of the movie was I didn't know how to say no to
Yeah.
things. And then it was hard for me to like, take any, sort of whatever for myself. And then I think that's what ended up having me create Help My Vagina's Trying to Kill Me, because that was where I actually told the real story of what
Sorry.
had happened, because I still felt like something was missing from that. And then so I wrote Patsy originally as a web series, but then I think I might be able to put this into a pilot episode and make it into a bigger series. And then when we made it into a pilot, it was like 25 minutes at the time. After it was all filmed and edited, both my producer and even my editor were kind of like, it might work better as like a standalone short film.
Yeah.
And they were also saying like it might get into more festivals because 25 minutes is pretty long for festivals to take and everything. And then so we ended up cutting it down to like 17 minutes. And then uh and then it actually, I didn't know, even before making the film, I didn't know how to make a movie. The only person I knew was like my producer, who was like a really good friend of mine. And then I had this man in my acting class that I thought was such a good actor, and I knew he had just made a feature a few years ago. And I just really admired him, and I knew he could get my acting to the next level. And then so those were like the two people I brought on, and then they kind of went on to like hire their team and found other people for me. I crowdfunded for the first time in my life and like met my crowdfunding goal in 2 days, which was
Oh,
really,
congrats.
yeah, it was Yeah, it was crazy because I think people were just excited that I was doing this new venture and
Mm.
stuff. And then we submitted it to a ton of festivals, by the way. I don't even know the full amount. I want to say it was probably 60 to 70 total. Like I think at the end we got into like 15, which number wise, now that I like know, it's actually very good. Like it's
Yeah, it's good.
yeah, and it wasn't just we got into we definitely didn't get into what I may consider some like the most top tier prestigious like Sundance, South by, Tribeca, and stuff like that. Although that's still my dream to get into one of those. But like, I would say we got into some like pretty good higher level mid tier sort of stuff, which for my first ever movie that I made, I would say not bad,
It's
not the
great.
worst. Yeah,
You're too
yes. And
modest.
yeah, and I even got at the time a distribution deal from somebody who was like, "You don't distribute shorts because it's not really like a thing a lot of people do." But
Mm.
he ended up liking my stuff so much that he was like, "Yeah, let's definitely do that." That ended up falling through, so actually I'm very glad about that. Like I just remember at the time like my director telling me that this film was going to be like my calling card, and I didn't really know what that meant
Mm.
at the time, but I have noticed like literally just in the last like week or 2 weeks actually, this one woman who I have heard of her. She's, I think, like half Asian, has been like a screenwriter. She apparently was at the Houston Asian American Film Festival for her short film. And after she showed it, a woman, I guess, who knows us both and has seen Patsy, like goes up to her and is like, "Hey, there's this woman in Austin named Yola. I think you guys actually might have like very similar styles when it comes to doing comedy and filmmaking and stuff like that. You should get to know her or something." So she reaches out to me. So now we're talking about, and then this other woman in Austin who's this female Asian American director that has like been seeing so much success in her films and everything, that I admire a lot and I like really want to work with someday also, but I always thought she wouldn't want to like work with me. She like saw my short film Patsy just recently at the Austin Asian American Film Festival and like reached out to me and was like, "Finally saw your movie, like it's so good, blah blah blah." And I like told her I would love to like work with you one day, present with to your project that you're like interested in. And she was like, "Yeah, for sure. Like, let's meet up and, get coffee, talk." And I was like, "Okay, so this might actually, like,
Opens door
even
for
though it
you.
didn't, like, yeah, yeah, even though it's not like making me money, because these things never do. But the fact that like people are like seeing me as like legitimate filmmaker or like storyteller was pretty cool, I would say, in that aspect. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
beautiful. I love what you told me about um, this courage of being vulnerable, especially when you share about purpose and about going through difficult moments such as miscarriage and divorce. Often, especially for me, also a lot of Asian women, I guess in China we say 家丑不外扬. I don't know if you heard of this.
Uh-uh.
We don't talk about private things happened behind the
Yeah,
door.
right.
But I find such a power in sharing those experiences because, as you said, it allow us to feel less lonely. It give us this feeling of being supported and we can ask for help. Also, when you talk about your challenge of not being able to say no, it's very relatable, at least for me. And I think this is such a inspiration for me to hear that you have been able to overcome such challenge through this creative process, through telling your stories. And I really love it. And in the last bit, when you talk about those opportunities have been opening up for you, also connecting with different Asian Americans, I
Yeah.
wonder what is like growing up in America from an Asian family and having different cultural influence, and how does that impact your comedy, your filmmaking, improve? Do you experience any stereotype or discrimination as such?
Yeah. I would say to be honest, like maybe my experience is like more different, especially growing up in Washington in the Seattle metro area and stuff where we actually do have pretty high concentration of Asian Americans living here. So I would say even when I went to college, there was always this like joke that I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, a lot of Asians. It felt like sometimes it was like 50% the population was Asians. And I think one of the reasons too was because I actually used to work in the admissions office as like a receptionist, so I knew all the numbers and just the statistics. And because we were such a school that was like pretty affordable, to be honest, even if you didn't have financial aid or something, I think the years that I was going there, it was around like 6,000 for the entire year. And then even towards when I was like graduating, I think it became like 9,000. And then I don't know what it is now, but it was definitely at a more affordable rate than some other schools, you know? But the people that paid a ton of money, like 35K and up, were the international students. And then because
Yeah.
they weren't qualified to get financial aid or anything, so you had the really rich international students like come. And so we had a lot of international students also. I don't know what it is, but like even when I was in like middle school and high school, I kind of just like gravitated towards like the other Asian kids, that also had like the same shared experience where like our parents were immigrants and then,
Yeah.
we're like first generation and stuff like that, like born here but like in a way didn't necessarily always feel super comfortable fitting in with like the other white kids for some
Right.
reason. I don't know. I don't know why. And it was because like I had been so just like I only hung out with like other like Asian kids. I only dated other Asian men at the time and stuff like that. It felt like it was almost even harder to like talk to white people at the time, even especially when I was like starting to like go out and work and everything, because I didn't know how to like be myself for some reason. I don't know why. And then it actually wasn't until I started doing comedy that there were really no other Asian people, especially in Seattle at the time. I was
Yeah.
actually like, I actually think I might have been the first Asian female Asian woman doing comedy in Seattle
Wow.
ever at the time. So it was kind of a big deal when I started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
First one.
yeah, but I would say I'd always told myself when I was gonna start doing any sort of comedy, stand up, whatever, that I really didn't want to do accents, like the stereotypical accents. I didn't
Yeah.
want to talk about, I didn't want to like punch down at my own culture
Culture.
at the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, even though I will say like the first joke I wrote was pretty hacky. I am not proud of it, but after that, I never really did anything to that level anymore. And I think because have my Asian roots and everything, but also my style of comedy, which I was like starting to find for myself, has always been like very dark and also like kind of like absurd in a way. And I like doing like weird things. I like breaking the fourth wall a lot of the time. Sometimes if like a joke isn't working, I'll be like, okay, hold on. I feel like that was very funny. You guys just don't understand it. Let me break down this joke for you guys and stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's awkward, cringe. It like has always made the audience like laugh in a way where they weren't expecting to and stuff. And then I feel like with my most recent show that I'm not even totally, I don't even think I'm actually going to film it anymore, but like the Dumb Asian show was actually kind of my first time really jumping in and talking more about the Asian experience in America or just like growing up here and stuff about this whole model minority stereotype that we have, and me personally not feeling like I fit into it. I didn't want to be like, oh, she's the Asian comic that only talks about being Asian and stuff. And I think that was something I was trying to avoid at the time. And then it wasn't until a few years later that I was like, why am I trying to do that? Am I trying to erase like my culture and my heritage and
Yeah.
whatever and stuff? Because I think in my head, I was like, I don't have to like talk about certain things of like being Asian, because the fact that I am telling this story or this joke or this thing from my point of view is inherently like an Asian experience, was kind of how I
Yeah.
thought about it. But like it was also in some ways that I was like hiding a part of it too. And I
Mm.
think that once I started really going deep into it and stuff was when I started feeling more comfortable with my comedy and being who I was on stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I love that you talk about this conflict within you that I also had before, because I moved to Europe over 10 years ago.
Huh.
And in the first few years, I always felt like this sense of I wanted to disconnect with China, with my heritage, with my culture, because there were reasons that I wanted to leave and move abroad.
Right.
I intentionally did not want to hang out with any Chinese expat or people from
Yeah.
China or Asia. But then later in the recent years, I start to realize, exactly as you said, that this is my root, and I do find a lot of inspiration, a lot of rich culture and learning and healing from reconnecting with my root. And that's
Yeah.
exactly why I started this show. It's called The Heritage Show. Is actually to connect with my roots. And I found so much growth from this as well. So thank you for sharing your experience with this topic.
Yeah.
You also talk about before about your desire of building the community. And I see you've initiated so many great projects like the Yola Asian and Disoriented Comedy, and also about the Dumb Asian Show and
Mhm.
everything else. That
Yeah.
how do you see the power of community in terms of your personal healing journey and collectively? And what are you looking forward to build maybe next project or community?
Yeah. I would say I think when I first started doing comedy and even doing something like disoriented comedy, because when I worked with both Jenny Yang and Otsko, they lived in LA, I lived in Seattle. So I didn't have other female Asian comics around me. And Jenny actually found me because she had Google alerts set for like Asian comics or female Asian comics or something. And I had just had this like write up for myself in Seattle. So she like reached out to me, asked me to like, just chat on the phone to get to know me and stuff. And then she was the one that was like, yeah, I have this dream of one day being able to like have all these like female Asian women come together to do a comedy tour and everything. And it was so interesting because that was like what we ended the call on. And I think like I thought about it for like a few days, maybe like 3 days later, I like messaged her and I was like, hey, remember when you said you wanted to do this like tour thing? I was like, why not? Like, let's do it. And then, so she was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure. And then, and she knew Otsko, and then she like pulled in Otsko for this and stuff. And then that's how we like started planning for this like tour. And I remember like honestly like the highlight of these both of these projects for both like Yahweh Asian and Disoriented Comedy, like for Galway Asian specifically, like I saw a need of like we didn't have Asian comedy showcases in Austin. We had other performance showcases where it was like maybe a martial arts demonstration or a traditional Chinese dance demonstration. There was no comedy. And I thought, like, why is that? And then when we were like, me and my co-founder, Kim Tran, were trying to book acts and stuff, because there's not a lot of us and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
we basically got everybody that we knew personally to do this show. And that was all the Asians in Austin at the time. It was so crazy because when we made the show, we didn't think how much it would blow up. Like, we had a whole marketing plan and like who we were going to reach out to for like student organizations, businesses, all that. We didn't even have to do that. Like, we created the Facebook event. This was when Facebook was still like very hot and like people used it. And like, we created the event. We didn't even invite anybody yet. And then maybe like a few hours later, I go to the event to try to like, start inviting people, and I saw it already had like 400 something people saying that they were gonna go. And I was so confused. So I thought maybe my friend, my Kim, went and already invited people. And I asked her, "Did you invite all these people?" And she was like, "No, I thought you did." And I'm like, "No." And then we realized, crap, our like event kind of went viral on Facebook. And then we looked at the ticket sales and like, they sold out. And then we kept having tickets to be like sold as walk-ups at the door. And even the day of, people came up to like an hour, 90 minutes early. There was a line wrapped around for people who still wanted to get tickets. People were trying to like resell some of the tickets for way more money. Who are we? Yeah. And it was so crazy that people were so into this because they were like, we have never had anything like this. And then this is kind of cool. And then later became, the showcase itself was called Yola Asian. And then we ended up using that for the name of the improv group. And then use the improv group as a way to almost become an incubator to train more comedic Asian talent and stuff.
Yeah.
Because we also found that, one, there weren't a lot of Asians taking improv classes to begin with, but also a lot of times people fall out of improv or comedy or anything because after you're done with all the classes, there's not really a next step of what to do, you know, to continue doing this. Yeah, so we just wanted to create a space for people to get good regardless of what your level was at. And even though I don't necessarily think we were like the best, I think because we met every week, we were all Asian Americans that shared very similar experiences. And then so I think we just also felt so comfortable playing with each other. And I will say, even to this day, when I did shows with Yola Asian, it was always the most comfortable and myself I've ever felt on stage because I don't know why, I just felt so incredibly supported no matter what. And I could be myself. Yeah. And that's such a hard thing to find sometimes. But I think it was always just that I wanted to create a space where other Asian Americans who wanted to maybe pursue comedy or something could have an opportunity to have a training ground to do so. And then I think what I'm trying to do next that I realized for myself was something I've been thinking about in general, not for all art actually, is how so much of the art that we see nowadays is always probably from people of a certain class or privilege level. You're either in middle class or upper middle class area because you have the opportunities to pursue these things that don't always like make you money right away or may never make you money.
Yeah.
Like, I think so much about how, you know, there might be the next David Bowie, like living in like a small town in Kansas that like, yeah, it just is hidden because like this person isn't able to afford music lessons or afford to like go on tour because they're like supporting their family. They have to work like 2 part-time jobs. just to get by. And even if they know they're really talented or they have it in them, but they've never been able to curate this and get better at it, it's because of this idea of like privilege. There's so many people that will come, other comedians that will come up to me and be like, it's so cool that you make your own stuff all the time, or you made these movies and all that. And people are like, I would love to do that, but just like don't know how. And part of the don't know how thing is because they don't have the money necessarily to do that. Even if they did crowdfunding for this, it's my crowdfunding barely touched the actual budget it took. And I had to actually take out personal loans to even get Patsy to the level that I wanted it to look like and be. And I could understand for somebody that maybe is struggling in some ways, not being able to have the finances to do that. And I'm only able to do that because I have a tech job that was able to help fund this stuff. And so I recognize that a lot. And then what I was trying to do prior was I wanted to start offering like a 6-week solo show class that I was teaching. And then I think I was charging, $350 for this. And I wasn't getting a ton of signups for this. And part of it could just be we're in a weird time where everybody's kind of strapped financially and stuff like that. And this might just be too much. But then going back to my whole thought of privilege and things, I'm like, man, if I offer this at $350, like there's a ton of people that still wouldn't be able to ever afford this. So I think what I want to do next actually is to open up a class just for either like lower income or BIPOC performers, but I specifically more of like the lower income, even if they've never taken a writing class before. I wanted to offer this free class in coaching to allow people to have an opportunity to tell their stories and stuff like that. And then so that's, I think, the next thing I really would like to do, because I remember when I was writing down these goals and missions and stuff that I wanted to do and create. And one of the things I wrote down was I wanted to start an incubator program where I could help find training for people who wanted to pursue these careers but didn't know how. Because I do think so many programs that we have out there right now, whether it be like a writing thing or a directing thing, they still want to see samples of your writing, samples of like things that you've created. And it, well, what if somebody really wants to write, but they never had the money to afford the classes, or they didn't know how to do it in a certain way? Yeah. And then so how can you say that you're like this fellowship program in a way to try to uplift like certain voices when you're also trying, the requirements of getting in are so high, and those aren't necessarily the people that need it. You have to go even below that. And then so that's what I kind of want to like start trying to make, which is like, how can we make this like point of entry easier for people to get started in and stuff like that. So that's the next personal project that I want to figure out. That's not necessarily like my own like comedy films or shows and stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's a beautiful mission. Thank you for sharing. And I hope one day you get to achieve this, and there are more people within the lower income can really have the opportunity to get trained and enter this field and have a different life just because of this one class or one training. And one of the reasons I invited to my podcast is because I have a very selfish question to ask. On my bucket list, I would like to also do comedy one day, just to try. If I have the talent, if I can pull it off. So for people like me who never had such experience and want to give it a try, what would you recommend the first steps?
Yeah, so I actually started by taking a class because that is just who I am. Like, I feel like I'm the type of person that's like, oh, in order for me to like start anything, like I have to take a class. I can't just like jump into it. Even like when I started this like new role at work, I ordered all these books and I read through them so fast, just like make sure
Wow.
I like got everything covered, sort of thing. That's just personally my personality. There are some people that would write a few minutes and then go try it at an open mic or
Mm,
something.
yeah.
But here is my take and how I approach everything that I want to do, but I'm maybe too scared to do it, is that I will sign up for a thing. So for example, this comedy special taping that I'm doing, I have it booked before this show is even fully ready, November 1st, like of later this
Mm,
year at a theater. And I
okay.
hired the director, I put a bunch of preview shows on the calendar and stuff, and I was like, well, it's already there. I have to do it, you know. Of
Yeah.
course I know that I could always cancel if I really
Mm,
had to, but I try to use that as a target date to go for
mm,
it. And then I set things on the calendar all the time before I even have a script, or I'll set a table read on the calendar before I even have a script written, just so I know
mm,
that I have to get something by this time. Because
yeah.
my motto is don't do it perfect, just do it. Like, because I think so much of the time, like we're in our head and we feel like we have to be ready in
Right.
order to like go and try something or do something for the first time. And I think what people don't realize is that like you're only going to get better by doing it. So if you
Yeah.
never even take that first step, because a lot of the time, like you might like be so in your head about it
Mm,
that like you wait 2 years to be ready and then you do it and then you do it and it wasn't even necessarily that good, or maybe it wasn't to your level of
yeah.
expectations because you waited so long and now your expectations are so high, and then now you get
Right.
even more disappointed of not getting the laughs or the reactions that you were hoping for. And I think because of this, I tell people just do it as soon as you can, put
Gotcha.
a time on the calendar and stuff. And then for me, I actually, if you have a stand-up comedy class in your town or something that you could be a part of that has a showcase at the end, because a
Ah,
lot of them
yeah.
do.
Right.
Yeah, do that. Sign up for that where they have a
Mm,
guaranteed showcase, and now you have to do it, you know? And then it
yes.
was actually because of that.
Accountability.
Yes, it was actually because of the class showcase that got me into doing comedy.
Mm,
And
yeah.
then so and the thing is, some people will say these comedy purists or whatever will be like, oh, you took a class, you're such a wimp or you're what. They think some people really look down on classes.
Yeah.
But first, if you've never taken a class, I actually tell people all the time when I took, because I've taken a few classes now, but when I take these classes, nobody's going through necessarily of this is how you write a joke and this is how they'll tell you the very basic thing of setup and punchline and what it means to have a punchline where you're like pulling the rug from under the audience and stuff because you took an unexpected
Tar
point of view, yeah, turn that they maybe weren't expecting. Actually, if you don't know necessarily how to write a joke, like I would actually recommend reading some books actually, because I have found almost no classes really teach this for some reason. I don't know why.
mm,
So they didn't really tell you how to do anything. It was almost, if anything, just an accountability thing. And then you bring your jokes that, because after the first class, they just tell you the second class, come with a bunch of jokes
jokes.
that you've written. And then now you get feedback from the class. That's really what the whole classes are,
Right.
just getting feedback. And then, so the way I do it to make it less daunting for people, especially if you don't know how to write a joke, is I feel like we all have a story we feel comfortable telling other people, whether it
Yeah.
be like a funny story or whatever, or an interesting
Embarrassing.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or something that you're just like passionate about, whatever, like an interesting story. And then take that, write it all down on paper the way that you would normally tell it. And then now go through and find spots like where you could like ad lib or think of something that would make it potentially
Funny.
funnier. So you're just trying to now make a funny story. And most open mics, if you did an open mic, they give you maybe 4 minutes, maybe three at a very busy open mic. And I always tell people you don't need to do the entire 4 minutes. If anything, go up even to one joke or do like 2 minutes, do less time because that was what stressed me out when I first started because I would like rehearse to make sure I wasn't going over the time. But you can't, to be honest, you can't control
The
that as
timing.
much as you
Yeah.
think. Yeah, because if you have no audience laughter, you're going to go faster than you
Yeah.
had planned. If you have a lot of laughter, it's going to go over what you had planned, you know?
Yeah.
And then so I always say aim, if it's 4 minutes, aim for three. Aim for 3 minutes, even aim for two, you know? And then so then you're not rushing either.
Right.
And I think telling a story that is funny or whatever is an easier point of entry into getting into comedy than it is to be I have to craft a joke and whatnot, because at the end of the day when you are doing even this like longer storytelling version of it, you are still crafting jokes in it. It might not just be the standard of how you would do it, but it's still, you still have the setup and then you still have that joke, which is still the punchline of it.
Mm.
And what I tell people to do is once you did it, let's say for the first time, and you started like getting laughs at certain places, then you go back to your notes or your document and you highlight the parts that got the laughs. And
Yeah.
then now you focus on those parts to make it even better or heighten it even more
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And then you have a set that you could potentially do.
Amazing.
And then just start whittling it down even further. If this whole story got you this laugh over here, okay, instead of this setup being a paragraph long to get here, how can I get to the meat of it to say what I'm trying to say in less words and then
Mm.
build that into a joke now, you know?
Wow.
What information can I pull from here that would be necessary for people to see that would go to the punchline, you know?
Yeah.
And then that's, I think, a better approach to like doing comedy when you're getting started and you don't really know what to do. But before you even write a joke, either sign up for a class
Yeah.
or go set a date on the calendar, go find your local comedy clubs, set a date, and then tell 3 to 5 friends that you're doing it, invite
Yeah.
them there. So now you have that accountability
Right.
and then you do it. But don't set it so far that you might give yourself
Procrastinate.
time to like, procrastinate, like to pull out of fear and stuff like that. Because I do think sometimes the longer that you're sitting with something, you will start also getting in your head and the
Yeah.
self-doubt creeps in and all
Right.
that. Yeah, yeah. So,
Absolutely. Thank you,
yeah.
Yola. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like a mini masterclass I just received from you.
Good.
So what I hear is just start it, set timelines, take a class if there are class with showcase,
Yeah.
tell your own stories, make it less time, but just keep iterate, keep practice, keep make contents and make it, more impactful for the funny
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome.
So my future plan now actually is I'm not planning to record Dumb Asian as a special anymore. I actually think what I want to do is I want to take Help My Vagina's Trying to Kill Me because I had the realization that that is my special. That is the story in some ways that I want to tell, but I was in a lot of ways very afraid to fully put it out there. And
Mm,
so I think because after the second iteration of it, it started becoming more of a stand-up show than a one-person show. And then so I think there's other things that I want to tell in it to shape it to be what I actually really would like it to be. And I have been doing so much of all of this stuff forever. I'm not making any money from any of this. I'm losing so much money. So I need something to start helping me make money. And then so I've always wanted to tour this show also.
mm,
So I thought I would use the November 1st taping as a way to one, invite potential touring managers to come and see the show live because I think there's nothing better than seeing a live show.
yeah,
And then, but
absolutely.
also in case they can't come to it, I want to have it be so professionally taped as a special, to be honest. And then now, after I get this try to sell it to a distribution company or try to pitch it to like a streamer like HBO,
Yeah.
like Netflix,
Netflix.
whatever. Aim for
Yeah.
aim for the highest that you can,
Yeah.
and then hopefully be able to like not only tour the show, but to also like have a special for this. And then because what I would like to do is like I would like to use this like touring money, the money that I make from like being able to tour the show, I would I would use it to try to fund my ultimate dream of like creating my own TV series that I am like not only self-funding, but I'm finding investors and everything. And it wasn't until I saw that Mark Duplass had recently created his like TV show using an indie film model and then sold it to Netflix, but got to keep all of the rights and everything to it, that he kept talking about would that be possible to do, and he proved that yes it was, because there are this current rise in like the streaming services buying these like mid budget TV shows now. And then so I was like, oh my gosh, like I could do it the way that I want to, because I do get a lot of enjoyment and excitement in like making things on my own. Like I don't know what it is. It just feels really great, like doing that. And then so that is like my ultimate goal of like, okay, so I'll do the special here in order to like make money, but also put out a show that I'm also proud of, but then also tell my story through this TV show that I dreamed of doing for so long now, So those are the next two big things that I'm trying to chase and get done, hopefully within, I don't know, in the next 3-4 years, just because I want to make sure financially I don't have to take out loans and whatever this time, that I could like, figure out how to do this in a way that isn't going to crush me in the future.
Yeah, sustainable.
So,
yeah. That sounds exciting, Yola. And I will send you a lot of good wishes from afar. And if you're ever touring in Europe, please make sure drop by Berlin. I would love to meet you in person. And before we end this episode, I want to ask you final question. If you have one wisdom or insight you would like to share to our audience, they are most likely expat women living abroad, a lot of Asian expat as well. What would you say to them?
I would say in our society where we are moving so fast, where we constantly are telling ourselves that maybe our worth and our value is placed on our productivity and like our output, what we can create. I understand that, yes, sometimes like we do that, maybe because we're like hiding from something, maybe we're not wanting to like feel a certain thing. And I think it would be very beneficial for everybody to, as hard it is, to like slow down for like even a few minutes, a few hours, and kind of think like, hey, I'm doing all of this stuff, but what is it that I really want to do? What is it that like I'm trying to, I'm putting in like 40 hours of this thing per week, but it is to fund or ultimately do this thing over here that I'm afraid to do because of whatever. And maybe think more of like, okay, if that's your ultimate goal, what can you do to like either reduce the noise to get there, or how do you get there in a more direct fashion in a way? Because that, I think for me, even though I've been doing this for so long, and I do think everything has had a reason of why I did it, there were so many things that I did just out of because I was too afraid to quit, or I didn't want to say no to like these certain things that didn't actually align with the things I wanted to do. And then because of this, I was spread really thin. I like wasn't as focused as I could have been. And I think it is okay to quit or say, hey, this just isn't for me and stuff. So I guess in short, think about what it is that you either really want to achieve or create in something, and then maybe work backwards of like, well, even taking all the noise away, what are the steps or what are the things that I could do to get to that? And I
Yeah.
think once people have that, then you feel more restful, you feel more driven and motivated to go after the soul thing that you're wanting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that how you said when you align with what you truly desire, what your heart is calling, then this is the path that you know is true for you, and you will get all the creativity, the energy, the power, and the luck.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing such a great
Yeah.
insight, and also sharing your journey of creative process, your own story of being vulnerable. And I really love our conversation, and
Me
I
too.
can't wait to meet you in person one day. And I wish you a lot of happiness and more success to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was great. Thank you, Yola.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining this inspiring conversation with Yola Jean Lu. I've added her contact in the show notes. Follow along her journey and support her work. If her story resonated with you, please follow The Heritage Show. Share it with someone who might need a bit of inspiration today. And leave a comment and tell me who you'd like to hear from next. Take care. Until next time.